Girls Like It When by Frib. Summary. Sai needs help trying to get Sakura's attention and affection when he finds Girls Like It When, the ultimate guide to becoming more than friends. Introduction. Sai's understanding. Sai remembered the day, the exact instant it happened. Team Kakashi was returning home from one of their easier missions and were only hours from the village. Sai didn't have much time. He had just finished one of the chapters of the book he had been reading, Friends and Friendship. Chapter 5, Holding Hands, had given him a great idea on how to boost the steady level of friendship that he had been gaining with both Naruto and Sakura. Captain Yamato was leading the group. Naruto and Sakura were walking side by side behind him, and Sai was alone behind them all. He placed his book into his pack and got ready to execute his plan. His palms were somewhat sweaty. This was nothing to fighting an enemy. With speed and stealth, Sai managed to unknowingly place himself between Naruto and Sakura, and with one quick movement he grasped each of their hands. All three ninjas stopped frozen in place. Naruto's head slowly and stupidly turned down to see his own hand clasped in Sai's. His jaw dropped and utter revulsion was written all over his face as he stuttered, "SS Sai. What the?" He tried feebly to pull his hand away, but Sai held on. Captain Yamato had heard the three stop walking and turned quickly to see what the problem was, but with Naruto and Sai's hands hanging in their air, all he could do was turn so they wouldn't see him laughing. Finally, over his momentary shock, Naruto wrenched his hand from Sai's. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked as he looked down at his hand. Naruto wiped his hand on his clothes vigorously, as if trying to eliminate any feeling of Sai's touch, which never seemed to be totally removed. Naruto's reaction had not been what Sai had hoped for, and he looked down disappointed and dejected. Slowly he turned his head to Naruto. "Naruto, I'm..." Sai's voice stopped and his eyes opened wide. His head shot in the other direction at Sakura, who he had just realized was still grasping his hand. It was this moment that had kept him up for the past 2 nights, this moment that he seemed to see whenever he closed his eyes. Sai had never seen Sakura as he did at that moment, her head angled acutely down, cheeks only slightly less pink than the bangs which hung down over her eyes, and her free hand drawn up to her face, her index finger pressed loosely against her lips, which were smiling shyly. Sai's closed eyes studied her face as he had countless times before, and then opened them to reveal nothing but his dark ceiling. "What is this feeling?" he thought out loud. Not receiving a response from the empty room, he closed his eyes again and relived the dream. Having fallen asleep during this recountenance, the dream finished in his sleep. Her giggle was quiet, but seemed to send shockwaves through their connected hands. "Sai," she spoke in a joyous tone, quite the opposite of Naruto's. "Why would you do that?" Sakura released Sai's hand, and it fell limply to his side. Sai did not sense the rejection that Naruto had displayed when he and Sakura's touch ended. Trying to comprehend the new emotions that were surging through him, Sai had not realized that silence had arrived, as both Naruto and Sakura and secretly Captain Yamato were waiting for his answer. "Oh." Sai looked around. "I read it in a book. I read that friends hold hands to show their closeness to one another, and I..." His voice faded off as Naruto's loud and disgusted rejection played in his head. Naruto sighed, relieved to discover that Sai did not have some secret crush on him, and Sakura giggled again. "Sai, holding hands is more for people who are..." She looked around, trying to find the best way to put it. "For people who are more than friends." She hoped that this vague statement would be enough to help him understand, but everyone present had already known Sai to misunderstand less complicated ideas than this one. "For people." Sakura tried to be more clear. "Who like each other." Of course, Sai did not completely understand. The next morning, Sai once again sat alone at a desk in the Konoha library with several stacks of books on friendship and related topics. He put Friends and Friendship on top of the rightmost stack, the tried and failed stack. The stack, by far the largest of all, teetered for a second with its newest edition and fell across the desk, knocking over the other stacks of books. The loud crash echoed through the large empty library. Sai's desk and the floor surrounding it was now a jumble of books, large and small, colorful and gray. Embarrassed, Sai quickly straightened up his desk and turned to pick up the books on the floor. He had never seen some of these books before. The first Ika Ika Paradise seemed to have been picked up by mistake, and the second, a large purple book that looked to have over 1,000 pages, seemed to be way too long. The third book that he picked up, however, caught his eye and grasped his full attention. This book was smaller than most, but thick enough to contain much useful information. It wasn't the size of the book that caught Sai's attention, however, it was one of the large words written on the front cover like. Sai, forgetting the rest of the fallen books, sat back on his chair and read the title of the book, Girls Like It When. Under the title, in slightly smaller print, read The Ultimate Guide to Becoming More Than Friends. Sai knew instantly that this was the book he needed. He stuffed the small book in his pack and ran home, leaving the mess of books for someone else to pick up. The entire trip back home, he realized the emotion he had been feeling and why he had picked that book. He wanted to be more than friends with Sakura. Chapter 1. Girls Like It When You Save Animals. Animals are a quick way to a girl's heart, however, buying animals does not work as well as saving their lives. For some strange unknown reason, most women find saving even the most meek and unusual creature from death to be admirable, but following the event, loud and childish ahs are usually heard, and in some cases mobs offering hugs of congratulations and happiness may occur. As an added bonus, the girl may be presented with animal, most likely causing high-pitched variations of "oh, it's so cute." Saving animals can be used not only as a way of meeting potential interests, but also as a way of furthering relations with already known girls. Warning: saving large animals does not have the same effect as smaller animals. Sai had returned home from the library and quickly read the short first chapter. After rereading it twice, he closed the book and decided to heed the advice of the book. He first decided that he would have to wait until their next mission as Team Kakashi, but quickly dismissed the idea. He was sure that Sakura was doing some task for the Hokage at the moment. He could follow her, and when he had the chance, save some animal. It was decided he went out to find her. Sai's presumption was right. Sakura was in the Hokage's office being yelled at by the Hokage. Sai stood just outside of the highest window listening to the Hokage scream for a reason he had yet to understand. Finally, he heard that Sakura was to retrieve this month's log from the village gates, over 200 pages worth of people leaving and entering. This was his chance. He waited as Sakura left the office, and finally made her way out to the streets towards the village gates. Sai tailed her, but trying to keep a constant lookout for danger animals within Sakura's view, he was forced to simply walk nonchalantly on the other side of the road. As they walked parallel, he had hoped that she would not see him. As he took his first look over at her, however, Sakura was waving at him and calling him over. Spotted Sai walked over to Sakura. "Hey Sai, wanna come with me to the gates?" His eyes on the floor, Sai simply nodded. Although the look on Sakura's face was not the same one he had seen in his dreams, he could not look up at it without staring. The walk was quiet for the most part. Sakura would say something or ask a question, but Sai would not respond, his attention focused on every animal in sight. "Come on. Come on," he coaxed under his breath. Finally, they reached the village gates and retrieved the logs. Both Sai and Sakura held a large stack of papers in both hands. During their return trip, Sai found it hard to keep his eye on the many animals surrounding them due to the obstruction of papers that rose to his lips. There was little time left, however, and Sai had to find something quick. As Sai started to worry that the plan would fail, he saw his opportunity. His eyes lit up as he noticed a small animal run into the street and freeze in the path of an oncoming cart. The cart was full of food and being pulled by a merchant that seemed to be in a hurry. Sakura. Sai wailed out so that she would certainly be watching as he saved this animal. Sakura turned her head just in time to see Sai disappear, the stack paper in his hands tossed carelessly to the ground. Sai reappeared over the frozen animal just as the merchant was about to unknowingly run over it, grabbing the animal and jumping out of the way. Shock ran through the merchant's body, and at the sight of Sai he tried to stop. This caused his cart of food to be tipped over and its contents spilled all over the road. Sai, triumphant, returned to Sakura with the animal in his hand. "Here, Sakura, I saved its life. You take it." Sai held the animal up to Sakura's shaking face. Before her, held by the long pink tail, was a large dirty rat. The rat's body tossed and its little rat voice clicked only inches from Sakura's face as it tried in vain to escape from its captor. Sakura let out a loud yell and threw her stack of papers in the air, hitting Sai's hand. The force caused Sai to release the rat, and he watched as it landed and scurried away, still alive, into the crowd of people in the road. Sai's plan had failed. When Sai looked back at Sakura, she was looking around for any sign of the rat. Shaking and obviously to anyone but Sai, terrified, she held one foot off the ground. "Did you see me save that animal?" Sai asked as Sakura eyed the floor. He ducked. "You saved a rat." Sakura yelled after she had unsuccessfully swung at him. 2 feet on the ground, she looked at Sai as if killing him was the only thing on her schedule today. Sai backed up a few steps as he tried to mumble what seemed to be his reasoning, or better yet, Sakura thought an apology for his idiotic behavior. Sakura cut him off. "Just leave." Taking one last sweeping look for the rat, she bent down to pick up the papers that had been scattered on the dirty ground. Sai too bent down to pick up some papers, but was met with another loud "leave" from Sakura. Disappointed, he turned and headed back to his home. He took one last glimpse over his shoulder to see that the merchant's overturned food had landed on some of the papers he had been carrying. He decided it best if he walked faster. That plan had failed, but luckily that was only the first chapter. He had plenty more to go. Chapter 2. Girls like it when you buy them clothes. Buying clothes for a girl can put you on the fast track to her heart. Clothes are a useful resource due to their easy accessibility, the ever-constant change in seasonal and popular trends, and the many different styles. There is always some new or different type of clothing that you can use to your advantage. Understanding a girl's lifestyle is key when making clothing choices. A girl whose lifestyle signifies somewhat expensive and lavish clothing will certainly not welcome a gift of cheap or poor quality, whereas a girl whose clothing is more plain and low cost may be uncomfortable being presented with high-class clothing. Also, you must take into consideration how and where the clothing will be used. A girl who is indoors much of the time with no strenuous work of any kind is more keen to lighter flowing clothes, whereas a girl whose life or occupation has her outdoors most of the time will need more durable wear. The clothes must match the girl. Warning: when it comes to clothes, money can never be a factor. The clothes must match the girl. The clothes must match the girl. Sai repeated the last line of the chapter as he closed the book and pictured Sakura in his mind. What kind of girl is she? He thought out loud. As different images ran through his head, he realized that Sakura's clothes, like most ninja, never changed much. The short red dress that hung down to her black shorts were the only 2 pieces of clothing that Sai's mind could remember. He searched his memory in vain for some other form of clothing, but other than the Konoha headband there was nothing else. He knew that of course she couldn't wear the same exact clothes every day. She must have numerous copies of the dress and the shorts. That would mean that the store that she buys them at must be in the village. He would have to search for the store, but he thought, would she really want another set if she has so many? Then it struck Sai. He again closed his eyes and let the images of Sakura run through his mind slower this time. In every image he could easily spot rips in the fabric or stains, even a few spots of blood. Being a ninja puts a lot of wear and tear on your clothes. The last image of Sakura was the last time he had seen her as he left her picking up pieces of paper covered in food and dirt. He winced as he figured that it was probably his fault that that set of clothes had been ruined. Sai searched the village for the store that Sakura bought her clothes from. His keen eyes found the store quickly where Sakura's dress hung in the display window. Sensible Clothing was a somewhat low-budget clothing store that was positioned in a very tough spot. Across the street from the store was K-Spot Fashion, the only store in the village that even came close to an upscale fashion store, and as Sai noticed, was occupied by at least 5 times the amount of people as Sensible Clothing. Walked into the store and directly to the rack of red dresses that matched the one in the window. As he looked at the different sizes, he closed his eyes and tried to picture which was the correct one for Sakura. He picked up one of each size. She's too small for the large, he told the oversized dress as he placed it back on the rack, and she's not a petite. He placed the almost child-sized dress back. Sai was stuck between the medium and the small. He held both dresses up side by side and tried to decide. The small he finally chose. As he lowered the medium dress back to the rack, a flash of light caught his attention from across the street. He squinted through the window at the source of the flash. It was from a dress in the window of K-Spot Fashion, placed the small dress back on the rack, and ran across the street and into the upscale fashion store. A suffocating feeling gripped him as he entered. He was closely surrounded by hordes of shopping girls and could sense that most of the eyes that had previously been on clothes were now on him. He was the only guy in the whole store. Luckily, the flash from the dress caught his attention again, allowing him to overcome the fearful feeling as he walked to the window. In the display window was a blue dress that looked almost identical to the one Sakura always wore, but the designs of red and green that encircled the dress made it look stunning. It was as if he had just found the strikingly gorgeous sister of Sakura's now very plain dress. As his eyes traced the designs, he realized what had caught his attention: the price tag hanging down. Warning: when it comes to clothes, money can never be a factor. The words rang through his head like a large, deep bell. Sai's mouth started to quiver as he looked at the number written on the tag. It was about 15 times the price of the red dress. Buying this dress meant he would most likely have to catch his own food until his next mission. His hand trembled as he forced himself to pick up the dress and take it to the clerk. Sai thought he might be experiencing sorrow for the first time as he emptied the contents of his money pouch onto the counter. The clerk wrapped the clothes as he replaced the little remaining money he had left into his pouch. "Hey, Sai," a woman's voice sounded very close. Sai turned to see Ino standing next to him, looking down at the blue dress being folded and wrapped in paper. "It's beautiful. Who's it for?" Her voice sounded hopeful. Sai hesitated. It's for. For some reason his usually sharp wits failed him and he could think of nothing. "It's for Sakura." The words seemed to want to come out. He knew he made a mistake as Ino's jaw dropped and her eyes lit up before turning into a very large smile. "For Sakura? But why?" The word "why" had been stretched out so long that even Sai knew that she may suspect his true motives, but suddenly her smile disappeared. "Oh, it's probably because of what happened with all that food getting on the village gate logs. I heard the Hokage was really upset." The smile seemed to reappear on her face as she spoke, and she let out a little laugh. "I mean, who could really like a girl with a forehead the size of a house anyways?" Her laugh became louder, almost evil. Sai was relieved. Ino had thought that the dress was an apology. Sai's relief was short-lived. Ino's loud cackles suddenly came to a halt as her eyes spotted something. The clerk had removed the price tag and had placed it on top of wrapped dress. As Ino's eyes read the price, her eyes seemed to expand and cover her entire face. "What?" Her large eyes turned to him again. "Sayu." Sai did not hear the rest of Ino's slow words as he had grabbed the package and ran from the store. He ran back into sensible clothing and hid behind a shelf of long pants. He knew that his quick escape was as good as a confession, but he knew Ino had realized the truth already. When he peeked his head out to the street, he could see no sign of Ino. Wanting to give the gift to Sakura before Ino told her about what had just happened, Sai turned to leave the store. He passed a bin of black shorts and suddenly remembered the second part of Sakura's attire. He sifted through the mix of different sizes. With no time to waste and without noticing the sign that showed the 10 different sizes of shorts, he quickly pulled out a size small as he had with the dress. He didn't bother to examine the extremely tiny shorts in his hand before purchasing them and running towards Sakura's house. Holding the 2 packages in one hand, Sai knocked on the door. He could hear loud steps coming towards him before the door swung open. Sakura stood in the doorway. Eyeing Sai, her expression turned sour, angry, but upon seeing the packages in his hand her face became curious. "What's that?" was her greeting. "For you." Sai held the packages towards Sakura. "For the other day." As Sai had been running through the streets, he had realized that his encounter with Ino had produced one good outcome. It had given him a believable motive for the gifts. He hoped that if Ino had believed it, Sakura would too. She did. Sakura's face turned to a slight shade of pink as she took the large package. Sai, her voice was much lighter and kinder now, and she was visibly embarrassed. "You didn't have to." She was already tearing apart the paper wrapping. "Sai." She had pulled out the dress and it unfolded to its full length and beauty. Speechless, Sakura held it up and traced the designs with her now large eyes. "Sai. You really didn't have to." But her words broke off as she pressed the dress against her body and looked down at it elated. I felt like this idea from the book was working out exactly as he had hoped. Still holding the other package in his hands, he held it out with confidence. This is for you too. Sakura's eyed the package with an almost greedy smile. She draped the dress around her arm and grabbed the smaller package. Turning around, she quickly tore the paper off. She was speechless again. Sai expected a similar reaction. He was dead wrong. What is this? Sakura held the shorts in front of her. Sai couldn't see her face as she had not turned back around. They're your shorts, Sai responded, unable to pinpoint the change in her tone. He thought that the answer had been obvious. There was a bit of silence as Sakura looked down at the shorts. Sai. Her tone remained as it had since she opened the second package. Aren't they kind of small? Sai still couldn't see the shorts in her hands, but he thought about it. The shorts were the same size as the dress, so they must fit. Sakura must be mistaken. There has to be a logical reason for why she would think they were small. The answer hit Sai, and he spoke out, no, maybe you've just put on some weight. He quickly thought of a way to fix her problem. Maybe you should train more so that you stay in shape and don't need to get larger shorts. He was lucky that she was turned away. Sakura's face started to turn red and her eyes had become two little slits on her face. She was breathing very hard. Put on weight. Sai could definitely sense a change in her tone. He didn't like it. Stay in shape. He couldn't figure out why she sounded so angry. Sakura slowly turned around. Sai knew that something was definitely wrong when they were face to face. Her eyes were still on the tiny shorts in her hands. Sai's eyebrows rose. The small shorts were obviously way too small for Sakura or anyone over the age of 8. Sai's mouth opened as he tried to explain the grave error, but Sakura cut him off. Leave. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible. Sai knew that it was best to hide her words, but he tried again to explain. Leave. Her voice was still soft. She looked up from the shorts to Sai. He could see the slits that were her eyes, fierce with anger. He had never seen her this angry before. Leave. Before I kill you. Sai, overcome with sudden dread, disappeared. Sakura, red-faced and breathing heavy, was left with the dress still draped over her shoulder and the tiny shorts in her hands. At night, Sai sat up in bed looking at the cover of the book that had failed him twice. What am I doing wrong? He asked the book. He wanted to give up, but as he closed his eyes, Sakura appeared again. He knew that he couldn't stop trying. Tomorrow is another day, he thought as he placed the book on his bedside table and lay down. Already dreaming of Sakura, he could not hear the footsteps on the road just outside his window. Sakura had gone for a midnight run. Chapter 3. Girls like it when you remember. Do you remember time in the restaurant when she spilled her drink all over the table and you two laughed about it for the whole night? Or that time when she tore her shirt and you had to spend the whole day wearing your jacket? Well, tell her. Remembering events of great meaning to her is a great way to make that move from friend to more than a friend. Letters are the best way. They are subtle and can be planned out. Write a letter of a special memory that you two share, making sure to include the right things. Include the aspects of the memory in which you two border on intimacy, such as any physical contact between you two or anything that belongs to only you two. Also be sure to very lightly touch upon bad things that other men in the memory have done, such as making fun of her or looking at other girls. You do not want this letter to help her remember someone else in a good light, only you. The element of surprise can intensify the effects of the letter. Secretly placing the letter where a young lady can unexpectedly find it is a very useful technique. Allowing her to be surprised by the sudden remembrance rather than informed in advance can provide a sudden surge of intense emotions after reading the letter. Warning: be sure to limit the letters you write, as using this method too much makes you look like a sissy. Sai closed the book and tried to think back to any special events that he had shared with Sakura. He walked to his desk and pulled out a pencil and a piece of parchment. What is a special memory that Sakura and I share? He asked the blank parchment. After racking his brain for about an hour, he realized two things. One, no memory he could recall was anything you could label as special between he and Sakura. And two, every memory save the last two attempts to win her affection also had Naruto in it, but those were memories he'd rather not remind her of. With these two realizations, Sai was stuck. He thought back to Team Kakashi's recent missions and wrote the first thing that came to mind. Sakura, do you remember our mission to patrol the border of the Fire Country? It was very boring. I know we didn't speak much, but I'm sure that was due to Naruto's constant whining and complaining. Do you remember the deer that we saw? We could have used that for dinner. Sai stopped mid-sentence. This letter was definitely not going to help him become more than friends with Sakura. There's nothing special about this mission or any other mission we've been on, Sai said angrily as he crumpled the parchment in his hand and discarded it to the floor. He looked down at a new blank sheet. The only reason a mission would be special to Sakura would be if. Sai's head lifted as a new idea entered his head. That's it. He felt a combination of familiar and unfamiliar feelings. He was used to the feeling of thinking about a problem and finding a solution, but he had never before been so joyous at the arrival of the solution. Sai's face looked like his fake smile, but he knew that it wasn't fake. He was not forcing it at all. He aimed his smile at the parchment and started to write. By the time Sai felt confident that the memory was the perfect one and that he had followed all the instructions of the book, his floor was littered with crumpled parchments. He had rewritten and revised the letter so many times and only stopped because he was down to his last piece of parchment. He lifted it up and read it for the 100th time. This is it, he told himself as he put the letter in his pack and ran towards Sakura's apartment. For about an hour, Sai hid on one of the roofs opposite Sakura's apartment and planned his method of surprise. From his viewpoint, he could see a window that led into Sakura's bedroom, and right in front of the window was a desk with some neatly stacked papers and a picture frame that held something Sai could not see. While he watched, he had seen Sakura sit at the desk, read a paper or two, and then leave her room numerous times. He knew that it was here that he had to surprise her. She would not expect the letter to suddenly be on the desk that she had been sitting at all day. Sai planned to use his ninja art summoning to create a bird that could carry the letter up into her window and lay it on the desk, but every time that Sakura left her room she would return before Sai could execute his plan. Sai waited for hours on the rooftop watching Sakura, unaware that he too was being watched. After the 4th hour of hiding and watching, Sai noticed a familiar blonde girl out of the corner of his eye. Ino was walking happily down the middle of the street. From the almost overpleasurable look on her face to the joyous skip in her step, Sai could not help but think that something bad was going to happen. After all, Ino could piece together all the clues that he had left for her, and worst of all, she was headed straight for Sakura's apartment. Sai started to sweat as he now watched her skip closer and closer. The sound of Ino's knuckles banging against Sakura's door echoed through Sai's head. With dread, he watched Sakura stand up from her desk and leave the room. In only a moment she was standing face to face with a smiling Ino. Sai's face sank. So this is sadness. He spoke the letter he now held in his hand. The sound of Ino's loud cackle caught Sai's attention and forced his gaze back to the two girls. He watched Ino with squinted eyes, and what he could only believe was anger. Ino threw her head back with laughter at something Sai had not heard, and she turned her body away from Sakura. Sai's eyes grew as his eyes connected with Ino's. Go. He had not heard the word, but she mouthed it so even an infant would understand. With a slight nod towards Sakura's window, Sai understood. Ino was giving him his opportunity. Her intentions understood. Ino turned around and yelled something into Sakura's face. Sai had no time to read Sakura's loud retort, but he saw that Sakura's attention was now fully on Ino. He summoned his ink-like bird, and it carried the letter up through the window and onto the desk unseen by Sakura. Like she had timed it perfectly, Ino yelled one last thing into Sakura's face, turned around, and stomped off, reappearing on her face only seconds later. Sai remained in his hiding spot as Sakura slammed the door. Just as Sai had planned, Sakura sat down at her desk and looked down curiously. She picked up the letter and looked out the window for its author. Finding no one, she opened the envelope and unfolded the parchment. Sai, knowing the letter by heart, read along with her lips. Sakura, do you remember our very first mission together? I remember it well. You and Naruto did not seem very pleased to have me on your team, but I remember that you tried very hard to become friends with me. Sai knew that at this point Sakura would know that it was from him. The facial expression that she would make now would show her feeling towards him. To Sai's enjoyment, Sakura smiled. I was reluctant. I had never had friends before, but then you hit me. You hit me very hard. Looking back, I wish I would have dodged it because it hurt very much. Sakura let out a very audible laugh and her smile only got bigger. Sai thought that his letter was perfect. He followed all the instructions to the T. Sakura read on out loud. That was the first sign of emotion I had ever received from a teammate, let alone a friend. Naruto refused to show me any emotion during the mission. He chose to save all of his emotion for Sasuke. I still do not understand why. Our first mission together was to bring Sasuke back, but he didn't want to come back. He wanted to stay with Orochimaru. Do you remember that he tried to kill all of us? He almost succeeded with Naruto. Reading slower and slower now, Sakura's smile disappeared and her face seemed to droop. Sai could not understand. He had explained the special memory, he had shown the physical contact between the two, and he reminded her of the bad things the other guys had done. He didn't know what could cause her to frown like she did. Sakura's voice was now very loud as she continued. I really think that a person like that, a person that no longer cares for the people he once called friends, a ninja who abandons his village, should be killed. You and I should have killed him. But you remember how it ended. Sasuke left with Orochimaru again, and we were all left barely alive. I'm simply grateful that we all survived and that I was able to spend time with you. Sai could not believe his eyes as Sakura crumbled up the paper. He had expected tears of remembrance to be flowing from Sakura's eyes, but instead her eyes seemed to be in flames. He could swear that part of the fire from Sakura's eyes had fallen onto the stack of papers, causing a small fire on her desk. Sai. The rooftop he had been standing on had started to shake at Sakura's voice. Sai struggled to remain hidden from her. In his attempt to better conceal himself, Sai could not see Sakura through the window, but he had assumed that the loud crash he had just heard was Sakura's powerful fist smashing through her desk. Sai. Somehow this time her voice sounded louder. Sai waited a few moments as the roof stopped shaking. The sound of a door slamming very hard caused him to look back at Sakura's apartment. She had left her house and was standing outside of her door. There was a crowd of people surrounding her. Apparently Sai was not the only one that had heard her loud yells. Sakura took one look at the crowd and, not seeing her target, proceeded to stomp off down the road. Sai feared that it was he that Sakura was searching for, but to his surprise and pleasure Ino stepped out of the crowd and confronted Sakura. Sai watched in earnest as the two had a heated argument in front of the many spectators. The yelling and name-calling did not last very long, but it seemed to take the anger out of Sakura. Sai watched as Sakura yelled one last thing at Ino and turned to head back to her apartment, obviously satisfied and happier than when she had set out. Slamming the door behind her, Sai finally took his eyes off of her and moved them to Ino, who had remained in place. A smile formed on her face, and again her eyes met Sai's. He watched as Ino formed a thumbs up and winked at him before turning and skipping back down the road. Sai decided it was best that he head home. This had been nothing but another failure. He didn't want to give her the chance to see him and reignite her anger. Sai left his hiding spot as Sakura picked up a crumpled piece of parchment and unfolded it. He never saw the smile reappear briefly on her face. Chapter 4. Girls like it when you can dance. There is not one girl alive that can help but fall for a guy who can dance. Don't know how to dance? Well, learn and learn now. Not everyone is born with the innate ability to dance, but there are many ways to learn. Watching others dance and imitating them is the most common way to learn, but for some this may take a long time. A quicker method is to have someone, preferably a friend or someone, will not laugh at your unskilled attempts. Teach you in private. Displaying your dance moves and strutting your stuff in a public area is the best method, as it allows for a multitude of ways to increase your chances of finally landing your girl. Not only will you gain the attention and admiration of the girl of your heart, but also of many other girls who notice you dancing. This attention by others will most likely cause your target to experience a feeling of jealousy and a craving for a return of attention. Allowing the jealousy to build will cause the girl to come to you. Also, this may be a time to think about if you should only have eyes for this girl. With the attention that you are assuredly going to receive from many members of the opposite sex, this may be your chance. Choose someone else. Remember the names and faces of those that seemed most wanting in the event that you soon notice that that girl isn't the one for you. Warning: prolonged dancing may cause severe sweating, which voids any idea in this chapter. The Konoha Fire Festival. Sai exclaimed as he closed the book. The Fire Festival is a night of fun and dancing for the whole village. There would be games and food vendors all throughout the village, and the center of the village would be converted into a large dance floor with a great band playing until the early morning hours. Sai smiled as he thought of him and Sakura dancing together all night. He realized that lately he wanted to smile when he thought of Sakura, and he didn't have to force it. His smile faded quickly, however, as he realized the one major problem: he could not dance. The Fire Festival was tomorrow night, and he knew that there would be no time to observe and imitate others. There was only one option: ask someone to teach him. But who? Sai tried to think of anyone that could help him, but no one came to mind. He had no real friends except for Sakura and Naruto, but neither of them could learn of his plan or his feelings. No one could know of his feelings for Sakura. But Ino knows already. His subconscious seemed to speak from his lips. Ino. It hit him: not only did Ino already know of his feelings for Sakura, but she had actually helped him deliver the love letter to Sakura's room. He hastily packed the book in his pack and ran towards Ino's flower shop. When he reached the shop, he pushed through the shop door and heard the bell that signaled a new arrival. Ino was at the counter with a customer, but her head turned slightly to see who had came in. She saw Sai standing at the entrance looking somewhat unsure. She gave him a quick smile and returned her attention to her customer. Thank you, Ari. I'll see you next week. The customer Ari took the change from Ino's hand and turned to walk out the door. Sai's eyes met hers, and she smiled at him. Sai knew that he recognized this girl from somewhere. K-Spot Fashion, the place where he had bought the expensive dress for Sakura. She must have been one of the many girls that were in the store when he walked in, or maybe when he ran from Ino. Hi. While remembering where he recognized the girl from, he didn't notice her stop right in front of him. I'm Ari, she said as she put her free hand out. Sai was surprised. He hesitated for a moment. I'm Sai, he finally said as he reached out and shook the girl's hand. As he tried to pull his hand away, she seemed to try to hold onto it. He's taking Ari. Ino's loud yell from behind the counter made both Sai and Ari turn their heads. Sai was confused, but Ari only turned her face back to his with a smile on it. Ari looked at Sai, but her words were directed at Ino. By you? Her words were soft and light-hearted, but dripped with malice. The last time I saw him, he was running away from you. Ino gasped as Ari walked towards the door. She opened it halfway and looked back at Sai. I hope I see you at the festival, Sai. With that, she was gone. Sai, not understanding completely what had occurred, walked up the counter. Ino's face was livid and her words were rushed and barely distinguishable. Believe that. Running away. I can't. Little. And as if she had barely noticed Sai standing there, her smile reappeared and her words were normal again. Sai. Are you buying flowers for a special someone? Her voice became coy. A special pink-haired someone? Sai hadn't even thought of going to a flower shop to buy flowers for Sakura. No, he said. Ino's face seemed to contort into thought as to why Sai was here. Ino. Can you? He seemed to not want to say the words. Of course, Ino already knew of his feelings, so he didn't know what this was so hard. He closed his eyes and spoke to the counter in a forced voice. Ino, can you meditance? His eyes opened and remained on the counter, but after a moment of silence they slowly moved to Ino's face. He was not surprised in the least to see a large smile covering her whole face. Of course. Ino jumped over the counter. Let's see what you've got, she said as she started beating a rhythm with her hands on the counter. Sai simply stood there. The beating stopped. Really? Was Ino's only response to Sai's complete lack of dance skills. She knew that this was going to be difficult. For the rest of the day, no one had entered the flower shop, which was perfect for Sai because Ino had decided to teach him right there in front of the counter. For the first few hours, Ino showed Sai the basics of dancing, where to step and how to move your body and hands. Being a very skilled ninja, Sai caught on very quickly and before long was able to dance respectably, or so Ino said to Ino's makeshift rhythms. During one of Sai's better dances, the bell on the door rang out and Ino's rhythm stopped suddenly. Sai's body froze in shock as his eyes moved towards the door. The door was closed, but no one was there. The room was still empty. Sai's shock slowly died away. Sakura stood just outside the shop, shocked at what she thought she just saw. She shook her head and walked back to her house thinking she just needed more sleep. There was no way she saw Sai dancing in the flower shop. No way. Ino decided to lock the door before they continued. She spent the rest of the day showing Sai how to avoid the mistakes that most guys make while dancing, such as getting too close, jerky, spontaneous movements, and throwing your hands in the air. By the end of the night, Ino had thought that she had produced one of the best male dancers Konoha had ever seen. Before Sai left, Ino had given him some tips for the festival. He left the shop and head home ready for tomorrow night. With all of his apartment windows covered, Sai practiced dancing well into the day. Below him, vendors were setting up their stations and the dance floor was being prepared. Before long, night began to fall and the streets of the village became alive. Bright lights shone everywhere and many great flavors mixed in the air. Sai waited a little while, just as Ino had advised. He left his apartment and walked the streets, playing games, eating food, and even trying to converse with an eager and loud Naruto, more of Ino's advice. Finally, Sai made his way to the center of the village and the still mostly empty dance floor. Sai watched as several girls danced around only a few guys. The guys Sai noticed seemed to all be making the mistakes that Ino had taught him to avoid. None of the girls looked too keen to get any closer to the guys than they had to. Sai circled the dance floor once and listened to the rhythm of the band that was playing. He hesitated to get on the dance floor, but Sakura appeared out the corner of his eye and his resolve was set. Sai found a lowly populated section of the dance floor and started to dance. His eyes closed, he moved his body the rhythm and tried to remember everything Ino had taught him. As the song died down, Sai could hear murmurs all around him. He opened his eyes and looked around him. Almost every eye was on him. Sai didn't know what to think. He tried his best to not show his embarrassment as he walked off the dance floor and found an empty table. Sai had hoped that Sakura did not see him dancing. He just wanted to go back to his apartment. He looked around and just as he was getting up to leave, was surrounded by several of his fellow ninja. Naruto, Lee, and Kiba were all yelling at the same time. "Wow! How did you do that? Can you teach me how to dance like that?" Sai couldn't tell who was saying what. The three ninja kept yelling random things as the music began again. Sai's feeling of embarrassment died as he realized that his dancing seemed to be good. As Sai looked back at the dance floor, it seemed more crowded, but mostly by women. To his surprise, there were several girls, including Ari, on the rim of the dance floor directly in front of him, motioning him to dance with them. Later, Sai yelled as he rejected all of them at once. He quickly scanned the crowd and found Sakura dancing on the other side of the dance floor. Their eyes seemed to meet before Sakura quickly turned her head away. Sai smiled as he thought that Sakura had noticed him dancing. It was just as the book said. Sai got up and went back to the dance floor. As he started to dance, he felt someone approaching him. Before he knew it, he was dancing with an excited-looking Temari. Every chance he had during the song, Sai would sneak a peek in Sakura's direction, and every time he did, her eyes would be on him. The song ended and Sai thanked Temari for the dance. As the next song started, Sai headed in Sakura's direction and she seemed to be coming towards him. Still separated by a few people, both Sai and Sakura started to dance alone. Slowly the two danced closer and closer to each other until they were dancing together. Sai didn't want the song to end, but eventually it had to, and Sai thanked Sakura for the dance. As he turned around, he felt Sakura's hand on his shoulder, the universal sign for don't leave. Sai turned around to see a sly look on Sakura's face. "Dance with me again, Sai." It was a request Sai had no intention of refusing. For the next 5 songs, the two danced, getting closer and closer to each other's bodies with each passing song. Every eye, male or female, was on the pair as they danced. "Wow, I need something to drink." Sakura was exhausted from the non-stop dancing with Sai. You wait here for me. There was something in her voice that made Sai's heart beat faster. Without thinking, Sakura put her hand on Sai's cheek and looked into her eyes. For an instant she wanted to kiss him, and Sai could tell, but she hesitated and instead just turned and left the dance floor. Sai was not disappointed, he was happy. This was happiness. He started dancing alone, incredibly thankful for both the book and As Sakura walked away. She couldn't help but keep thinking of Sai. There was something about him tonight, something about the way they seemed to choose each other. Even though he's been acting a little awkward lately, he's been trying to do good things for her. For her. He's been doing things for her and her only. This thought hit Sakura so fast that she surprised herself. I like him. She couldn't understand how it happened so suddenly, but she knew that she liked him. Sakura stood in line for a glass of juice, thinking about if she should tell Sai as a loud voice rang out over the music. Give it up, Ari. She knew that voice. It was Ino. Sakura turned her head to see Ino arguing loudly with a village girl that was about their age. Sakura had just received her juice glass from the vendor as the other girl yelled back at Ino, "Look, I don't care if Sai goes shopping with you and spends the whole day at your stupid flower shop. He's gonna be mine." Sakura stood dumbfounded. She couldn't hear anything except the village girl's words in her head. "I don't care if Sai goes shopping with you." She couldn't understand why would he be spending time with Ino. "Spends the whole day at your stupid flower shop." Sakura's face grew red. She had thought that Sai was only doing things for her, but he was doing things with Ino too. She thought that Sai liked her, only her. Was he trying to play the field? Sakura stomped her way back to the dance floor and Sai, who was still dancing happily. She had planned on yelling obscene words at Sai and pounding him into the ground, but when she reached him she could do neither. She simply stood there not knowing what to say and feeling like she wanted to cry. But she couldn't cry. Besides, she had only realized she liked him just now. The look on Sakura's face. Sai stopped dancing. "Sakura, what's?" Sakura's juice was all over Sai. The music stopped and again all eyes were on him. Sai was confused and he didn't know what to say as he looked into Sakura's saddened eyes. Sakura looked back at him but then turned and walked away slowly. Sai wanted to chase after her, but something told him that that would be a terrible idea. He watched her walk away from him, and when she was out of sight he turned around and headed home. Sai didn't realize that the music had never started again or that everyone around him was talking quietly about what had happened. When he finally got home he laid in bed and tried to understand what had gone wrong. There was no way he could know that Sakura lay in bed thinking exactly the same thing. He had gotten so close. He had been closer to her than ever before, and then what? The book had failed him again, but he hadn't seen this one coming. He was approaching the end of the book, so there weren't many more chances to get it right. The next one had to be it. Chapter 5. Girls like it when you like their friends. We hope that you've already achieved your goal of becoming more than friends with that special someone, but if you haven't, we still have one juicy tip up our sleeves. Animals, clothes, special events, dancing, they're all great methods, but this is the best. It is also, however, the hardest, sometimes even impossible method there is. The payoff is worth it though, due its immediate and long-term effects. The immediate effect of liking your special someone's friends is that you will be able to spend more time with her, him, and have a great excuse to get to know them, their likes, dislikes, tastes, etc. better. This also allows them to get to notice you. The long-term effect occurs after you become more than friends. Many a relationship has been ruined or in fact never started simply because one partner did not seem compatible with the other's friends. Your target needs to know that if they chooses you, they will not have to choose between spending time with you or spending time with their closest friends, but that they can have both together without problems. Now listen carefully, you don't really have to like the friends. As long as you can tolerate them to a certain degree, it is easiest to live a little white lie for the sake of your newly acquired loved one. Eventually you may learn to enjoy their company as well. Unlikely. Warning: expect these friends to be very, very protective over your special someone. It may take time for this method to work, but don't give up. Warning: yes, 2 warnings. Most friends are very similar in tastes, clothing, music, literature, but are usually very different in attitudes. For instance, if your target is sweet, caring, and soft-spoken, expect the friends to be loud, rude, and obnoxious. Prepare for the worst and stay sharp. Sigh. Ino's yell of surprise drowned out the bell over the entrance to her shop. Sai had just walked in alone. How? Her loud voice dropped suddenly to an almost whisper. How are you? Despite her best effort, the guilt she felt would not even let her fake a smile. Hello, Ino. I'm well. To Ino's shock, Sai's tone was not harsh at all, and he didn't look the least bit upset. In fact, Sai's voice and facial expressions were perfectly normal, devoid of any and all emotion. Instead of heading straight for Ino, Sai casually started looking around at the various selections of flowers filling the shop. Ino's eyes shot down to the counter in front of her. It was true she had hoped Sai would not be angry with her, but the fact that he was acting as if nothing had happened that night at the festival was even worse. If only Sai would yell at her, demand that she apologize, or maybe even destroy some of her flowers. In an angry rage, her guilt could start to fade. Lost in her hopes that Sai would start to show his anger, Ino's head rose just as Sai let out a loud yell. Ino. Her face was a mix of fear at what Sai might say next and happiness that it was finally coming. To her great dismay, however, Sai had not yelled in anger. He had been forced to raise his voice because even though he was right in front of Ino, his entire head was hidden by several bouquets of flowers. Which? Sai lowered the bouquets so he could be hit easier. Which do you like the most? Ino's face seemed to sink. Ino didn't even bother to closely inspect any of the different bouquets. Despite the 12 sets of bouquets Sai held in his hands, there were only 2 different types. Ino could only think that Sai liked the 2 different sets of bouquets so much that he kept grabbing them. Her hand rose slowly, and she extended her pointer finger towards the middle of the bunch. At that very moment, Sai smiled, and a sudden realization struck Ino. She had only ever seen Sai only smiled when he talked about Sakura. She couldn't help but return Sai's smile even though his eyes were now on the bouquet Ino had pointed out. Sai. Ino's voice still hadn't regained all its perkiness and volume. Is there anything else I can do? She knew that her voice sounded hopeful. Sai seemed to be surprised by the question as his eyes moved from the flowers in his hand to Ino, but only because he had not expected this part of his visit to go so smoothly. He had known that choosing the right bouquet would be quite simple, but he thought that getting Ino to do him another favor would be much harder. Well, his smile vanished and his usual features returned. Can you talk to Sakura for me? Ino's smile seemed to stretch across her whole face. Of course. Her voice almost blew the flowers out of Sai's hand. Inside, Ino's guilt was already started to fade. I'll talk to her today. She could tell Sakura that she was sorry. She could tell her how hard Sai had worked that day. She could fix everything. Sai gave Ino another smile that made her feel even better. He turned and started to walk out of the shop. Sai. Ino's voice rang out. He stopped at the door and turned to look back at Ino. Good luck. Sai simply turned back around and walked out of the shop. Ino didn't have the heart to tell him that he forgot to pay for the bouquet he left with. From his rooftop viewpoint, Sai could easily see the entrance to Ino's flower shop. To his surprise, Ino closed up extremely early and seemed very happy to be on her way through the village. Sai watched as she peeked into a couple of businesses and restaurants and talked to a few people in an apparent search for Sakura. Before Ino had the opportunity, Sai had spotted Sakura through a restaurant window. He wanted to yell down to Ino to go into the restaurant, but he knew his plan wouldn't work if he did. Luckily, Sakura walked out of the restaurant just as Ino was standing at the entrance. The 2 girls paused and stood face to face. Sai saw Sakura's face become instantly annoyed, and he didn't have to see Ino's face to know that Sakura's unexpected appearance was a complete surprise. After several very tense seconds, Sakura walked past Ino. Her few steps showed an urgency to escape Ino's presence. Ino turned to face Sakura's retreating back Sakura. Sai couldn't hear Ino's voice, but he was very skilled at reading lips even from a far distance. Sakura stopped. Her face was turning from annoyed to angry. Sakura, let me explain. Sakura quickly spun around to face Ino. Although Sai could only see Sakura from behind, it was very apparent from her body language that she was saying something very angry to Ino. After what must have been a few quick loud sentences, Ino's eyes hit the floor. Sakura crossed her arms as Ino's lips started to move slowly. Because of the lowered angle of Ino's head, Sai couldn't understand what she was saying. After almost 2 minutes, Ino finally raised her head, but now she was talking at a much quicker pace. Her lips were moving so fast that Sai could only make out parts of her sentences. Asked me for dancing all day. Fire festival. Stupid Ari. Juice everywhere. I'm so sorry. Sai watched without any idea as to how Sakura would react to learning what had happened. Luckily, Ino's sudden smile seemed to indicate that Sakura now understood the misunderstanding. Now it was Sai's time to act. He leapt from his rooftop hiding spot, flower bouquet in hand, and headed towards Sakura. Ino, who had already spotted Sai, put her hands on Sakura's shoulders. Sakura, Sai's coming. She helped Sakura turn around to face the oncoming Sai. Sai smiled as he approached the two girls, and Sakura's face lit up into a bright smile as she saw the flowers in his hand. Hello, Sakura. Sai stopped in front of the two girls and pressed the flowers out in front of his body at Sakura. Ino. These are for you. The bouquet's direction changed just slightly so that Ino could grab them. The words seemed to be said in slow motion to both girls. Both Sakura and Ino looked down towards the bouquet for a moment and then up at Sai, the bright smile still shining on his face. Both girls' facial expressions, however, had changed dramatically. Sakura's eyebrows now formed a large V, and the wrinkles in her huge forehead could not be counted, while Ino's eyes seemed to have exploded in her head and her mouth was in the evident shape of a loud no. Several angry curse words rang out, some louder than others. Sai's face hurt and the bouquet was flying out of his hands. The only thing he could see was a blurry Sakura marching away from him with her shoulders hunched. What had happened? Something had apparently gone wrong. Sai turned to look at Ino, who was completely shocked and speechless. Sai thought that he had done everything right. He found Sakura's friend, found her favorite flowers, and gave them to her in front of Sakura. The book again, and for the last time, had failed him. With no more chapters in the book, Sai had no choice but to give up on Sakura. He put his head down and headed towards the library. His walk towards the library was an awkward one. His head was filled with emotions that he had never felt. He thought, this is sadness, this is failure, this is wanting something you can't have. A watery substance formed in the corner of his eyes, but remained there. He had no idea what was happening. He had never learned how to cry. Something about this made him feel a little lighter. The library had recently become like a second home to Sai. Head still down, he entered and walked towards the return desk. Sai stopped in front of the desk, and the elderly lady behind it reached back into his bag and found nothing. The book, The Ultimate Guide to Becoming More Than Friends, was nowhere to be found. Sai's head lifted for the first time since he watched Sakura walk away, and he tried to remember where he had left the book. His eyes were focused on the ceiling. Nothing came to mind. He had placed the book in his bag when he left to Ino's flower shop that morning. Maybe it was at Ino's shop or on the rooftop he had hidden on, or maybe it was. I'd like to return this, please. The voice sent a chill through Sai's body. His eyes shot towards the source of the voice. Sakura stood before him. Sai's eyes took in the beautiful red and green designs etched on the brilliant blue dress she was now wearing. It was the one he had bought her. He would have smiled if his body had let him, but the next thing he noticed was the Ultimate Guide to Becoming More Than Friends changing from her hands to the elderly lady's. His body became slightly numb as Sakura turned towards him, her face emotionless. Sai's mouth seemed to form incoherent words as Sakura looked at him without blinking. He really didn't know what to do or say to her. Sakura. He finally managed to spit out. He had read in a different book that this was called being pitiful. Sakura simply smiled, and she held up a finger to Sai's mouth. Sai, her voice sounded sweet. 1, I'm a dog person. 2, I really do love the dress. She pulled her finger back and spun around. The blue dress that Sai had spent so much money on flowed around her body. Sakura's body stopped and she continued. 3, you are a great dancer. Sai laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh, or at least what was now becoming normal to Sai. It was like a surprise oomph that happened, involuntary. It made him feel instantly better. But just as his body started to regain feeling, Sakura's voice rose. And 4. I hate that pig Ino. Sakura started to laugh as soon as she finished the sentence. From what Sai had read before, this was called sarcasm, but something Sai saw in Sakura's eyes said that this sentence wasn't completely untrue. Sai was still speechless. What was going on? Sakura had obviously known that he had used the book to get her to like him. She had found his plan out. Why was she explaining all this to him, and why was she smiling? Sai's mind raced with so many thoughts that the words just came out. Sakura, I like you. Sakura gave a little laugh. Yeah, I read that. Sai couldn't help but take this as a negative. He didn't want to look at Sakura. His eyes hit the floor. Sai. Sakura grabbed his chin and lifted her face to his. The two stood face to face. Sakura's bright smile to Sai's emotionless expression. I like you too. Sai's face lit up. This is surprise, he thought. Then his face burst into a great big smile. This is happiness, he thought. Sakura now looked into a bright smiling face that, as Ino had mentioned earlier, was directed only at her. Why don't we go for a walk and talk about the things that you like, Sai? She turned, grabbed his hand, and faced the exit. Sai stood looking down at their intertwined hands. The image in his eyes reminded him of that day in the forest, the first day he had realized that he liked Sakura. As he looked up at her face this time, however, it was not pink with embarrassment, but smiling dazzlingly back at his. The two walked out of the library together. The ultimate guide had not failed Sai. In fact, it had done exactly what Sai had hoped for. He and Sakura were now more than friends. The end.
Thank you for your views, likes, subscriptions, and overall support of my ongoing efforts to bring great content to all of you. Check out my Patreon for more mature fanfiction. The link is in the description and like everywhere on my channel.